Hello, Jan. Welcome to the Writing Tournament channel. How are you?
Very well. Thanks ever so much, William, for having me. This is very exciting.
Good, lovely. Well, we have J.M. Carr today, author of Wonder
Yeah.
Girls, the Wonder Girls series, and many other things. And she's the first round judge for the writing tournament. So if you like, we can get straight into the questions and find out more about you and find out some tips.
Great. Yes.
So first of all, what joys and challenges come with writing a book set in the past? The Wonder Girls is set in 1936.
So the joys and challenges that come with writing a book set in the past. Well, one of the joys is doing the research. It's such fun and just so interesting. And a lot of the research for me is looking at old photographs and trying to imagine what those people the situations that those people would be in those photographs, what it felt like to be living in that at that time in 1936, for instance. And I love looking at old photographs, and so that's great. And then of course, you know, there's lots of reading to do, and that's really interesting. Found out all kinds of interesting stuff about life in the 1930s, and of course, you know, as much as that's a joy, that's a problem, because it's really easy to do an awful lot of research, do reading, get very distracted, lost on Pinterest, and then not do any writing. Or the other problem is that you have found out all this interesting stuff and you want to put it all in your story. And it's quite hard to think, all right, I found out all this interesting stuff, but it has to stay out of the story. The research, I kind of try and make it so that it informs the story, but that doesn't necessarily make the story, if that makes sense.
Okay, question number 2. So along the same lines, but what writing tips would you give to some of the young writers that might be entering the tournament?
Okay, my biggest tip is when you're making the story, is just write. Don't worry about how neat it is. Don't even worry about spelling and punctuation and things. All you need to do is to get your ideas out onto a screen or onto a paper, or, you know, wherever you're writing. Just get them out just good enough so that you can read them back, because quite a famous saying for everybody who's writing is rewriting. So, you know, you've got to go over it. You'll be very, very, very unlikely that you will produce something that you're happy with on the very first go. You just need to get your ideas out. So don't worry about spelling or neatness or anything. If you saw my first drafts, you wouldn't be able to read them. I can barely read them, but I can just about read them enough so that I know what's going on. And that's the important thing. Get the ideas out, and then the writing is all the stuff that comes afterwards, all the crafting and the shaping and the honing. I kind of think of it like being a sculptor. So the first thing you do is you make a frame, and then you add bits of clay to the frame for whatever you're going to make, and you've got more or less the general shape. But the actual sculpting comes after you've got the general shape. So get in there, get the general shape first, get your ideas out, and then rewrite and go over it and think, how can I make this better? That's my big tip.
That's great. I didn't know that sculptures had frames, so I've learned something.
I have watched a program. Oh, sorry, William. I have watched a program on Channel 4 in the UK, which is the Great Pottery Throwdown, and I have learned an awful lot about clay and sculpting from watching this program. And so, yeah.
And it is great advice that I wish I'd heard from you sometime in the past 39 years, because I used to write and then throw it in the bin. So yes, write and then rewrite. Don't expect it to be too good first time around.
No.
Stick with it.
Exactly. And a really good thing about particularly if you're writing on paper and use notebooks, is that when you are a successful author, those notebooks are great things to show people. You know, it's really interesting to see how a story has developed, or a piece of writing has developed from the first notes or the first scrappy doodles and, you know, jottings and things like that, to the end story. So that's why it's another good reason it's a good strategy. But just, you know, don't worry about it. Don't worry about writing the perfect sentence first time.
Okay, so moving on to maybe a more difficult question.
Yeah.
What makes a good story? What makes a good story?
Well, what makes a good story? I think the most important thing for a good story is action. And that doesn't mean sort of like hanging off tall buildings or taking a zip wire across Niagara Falls or you know, doing things like that. That doesn't mean all those huge actions. It means little actions as well, like just sort of rubbing your nose, or a character rubbing their nose, or a character tying up their shoelaces if they have shoes with shoelaces, you know, or action, characters doing things. And why that's important, it's because it's what you're trying to do when you're writing a story is you're trying to put what's in your head into the head of the person that's reading. And so you've got an image in your head that's things happening in your story, and you need to write them in such a way that they go into the person who's reading's head. And when you're imagining things, the easiest things to imagine are characters doing stuff. So and that is all about, so characters doing stuff, that's all about what verbs you choose. And so verbs are very important for action. So, you know, because they're doing words, aren't they? And action is doing stuff. And so I think what makes a good story is action, whether it's big action or small action, and to do with that, so that the kind of verbs that you choose, for instance, if you've used a lot of the verb, any variety of the verb to be, so lots of was's or is's, or if you're in the first person, am's, then think how you can change those verbs to being not about just being, as opposed to somebody drawing a picture, or somebody running a race, or, you know.
Okay, so we've got two questions in one, it looks here, unless I just haven't put space between the questions.
Yeah.
So which is the first story you fell in love with, and why?
Well, I forgot to bring look for a copy, but one of the very first stories that I remember getting out of the library, when my mum used to take me to the library every week, it's called The Happy Lion, and it's about a lion who lives in a zoo in Paris, and everybody who walks past his pen always says hello, bonjour, to the happy lion every day. And one day the zookeeper leaves his cage, his pen open, and so he decides to go and, you know, go out and be sociable with the lovely people who said hello to him as they've passed every day. But of course they all run away, and I love that story. I love the story that he was, at heart, he was a very lovely lion, and didn't realize how scary he was when let out of his cage. Anyway, so The Happy Lion, and I've got one of my very first favorite books here, which I was planning on doing it as a giveaway, because it's the book that inspired me to write the Wonder Girls in the first place, and it's called The Family from One End Street, and it's about a family with 7 children, and the mum is a washerwoman and the dad is a dustbin man. And this book was written in the 1930s. It won the Carnegie Medal, which is a big prize for children's books, and you can see the name of the author, Eve Garnett, and she drew the pictures as well as writing the story. So it's lots of stories about this lovely family. And I like it because it's not about, lots of books in the past used to be about really quite privileged children. If you think about Enid Blyton, 5 books, for instance, they're children who maybe go to boarding schools or for the time, you know, had cars and things. And this is a poor family, and I really like that they feature as the heroes of this story. And there's some fantastic characters and stories. So, and it's wonderfully still in print. So I'll just check the.
So how can we win? How can we win that?
So I was going to. Well, I'm nearly ready with my second Wonder Girls book, nearly ready. And so I was going to sort of promote this as an incentive for people to find out about the second Wonder Girls book by signing up to my mailing list. But that requires a lot of admin that I'm not quite there yet with it. I should be, but I'm not. And but I've got these in readiness as giveaways. So
5. Tell us about, okay, so you've told us a bit about this, your series, The Wonder Girls. If you could tell us a little bit more about it, why you think people would love it. I've read the second one, which is nearly ready.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And tell us about that.
Right. Well, obviously, I hope that everybody would love it, but I know that's not going to be the case. But I think it would appeal to people who like lots of action in the story, people who are feminists, so that's girls and boys, people who like to stand up for what's right, because my characters, they're not exactly rebellious in a bad way, but they like to, when they see something wrong happening, then they're going to stand up and say that that's wrong, and they're going to sort it out. So in the first story, the baddie is an uncle of one of the characters, and he's got a very devious plan to send children away to Hitler. And so this is before the Second World War, and he has a very particular purpose, and that sounds and it is, yeah. So he, I'm gonna stop. Can we ask that question again?
You can just carry on if you like it, just from where you were, and I'll just cut that middle bit out if you want.
Okay, so who do I think would like the Wonder Girls? I think feminists. So girls and boys, people who are activists, who like to sort of stand up for what's right and shout about things that they see that are wrong in the world. People who like action, yeah. So and people who like history as well.
So in terms of writing, what do you wish you'd spent more time learning about as a youngster?
The first thing that comes to mind for that is I wish I'd spent more time learning how to play the piano, but that's not to do with writing. But the thing is, when I was a child, I didn't think I had an imagination, and so I didn't like writing, and because it was hard work, being neat and just, and you writing what I thought were quite dull things. So yeah, I didn't really enjoy writing when I was young, but because I didn't believe in myself, so I didn't. But I had the mistaken idea that I didn't have an imagination, which was rubbish, because I clearly did. So for people entering the writing tournament, don't be put off by a writing tournament, because if you're like me, then you might have associate writing with school, and school, you might enjoy school, and I think school can be lots of fun, but some people have the experience where school isn't so much fun, and they might associate writing with that, and I kind of prefer to think about it as story making or story creation, and really exercising your imagination rather than sitting down to write. Though obviously you've got to write, because that's the way we have of recording it. Some people can dictate what their stories, or some people just prefer, like typing, for instance. But yes, so I wish I'd learned and realized that I did have an imagination, and all you've got to do is exercise it. And sometimes that means just starting. So if you're a person, and lots of people do like the action of writing, but if you're a person that doesn't like actually writing so much, then don't think of it like that. Think of it as making a story, and the writing is just the means to the end of them. It's just the way that you get your story and that you create your story. So that's what I wished I'd learned as a youngster, was that I'd realized that I had lots of imagination, and all I had to do to make it work was just start writing.
And these days, people are writing whole books, at least first drafts, on dictation. So if you've got a phone and you want to talk the story out, then let us know if you've done that. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, no, that would be really interesting, and yeah, that would be great. So no fear, no, just go for it, really. And I love reading what young people have written. At one point in my life, I did do some teaching, and that's my favorite thing, was reading young people's stories, because they usually have just brilliant ideas and in them, and make me think, I really wish I'd written that. So yeah.
So okay, the big one, and people can steal this idea from you, if they like, or be inspired by it. Be inspired by it. Would you like to propose a Border Reaver inspired story?
Yes. Now, the first thing about stealing ideas, I don't think stealing ideas matters, because I think lots of people are worried that somebody will write the story that they were going to write. No two people are going to write the same story. So they might start off with the same idea, but what you do with it, that is for you alone. Very, very unlikely, if impossible, to write the same story as another person, even when they're starting from the same idea. So stealing ideas, I'm not bothered about that at all. Because we all have our own voices, and we all, we may start off at the same place, but we'll go in completely different directions. And even if we go in the same direction, we'll treat it differently. You'll have different characters, different thoughts in the characters' heads. So my Border Reaver idea is, I was thinking about a Border Reaver who's a girl, and she has one big fear, which is she's really afraid of horses, which is would be quite a thing for a prospective Border Reaver, wouldn't it? Because they were fantastic horse riders. And so I was thinking about this girl who was afraid of nothing else apart from horses. And I was wondering why she'd be afraid of horses, and how she overcomes that to join in with the raids and the things that the Reavers did, and how they survived, in the borders between England and Scotland. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes in, and what young writers imagine, and what they put in their story, and how the characters that they create and things. So yeah, thank you so much, William.
Please hang up and try again.